just do a round of introductions so we all get to know each other. I'm Sean Irvine. I'm the Economic Development Director for the city, and I'm also the staff person for the Parks and Rec Commission. I'm going to start, I'll just name people. So Mr. J, why don't you go?
Good evening. I'm John J. This is my first meeting with you all. So, like I said, I'm lived in Colorado for 30 years. Moved out here in 2018, just in time to take a job up in Seattle for a year and a half. Got back here in time for the pandemic. So,
sounds like a winding path.
Yeah. So here I am. I decided to get involved with the city.
That's great. Glad to have you. Councilor Job.
I'm Sarah Job, Independent City Councilor.
Great, thank you. Jasper.
I'm Jasper, and I live here in Independence.
And Mr. Klein.
And I'm David Klein. I was the city manager for about 8.5 years, Independence, and a citizen and resident in the community.
Great. And then you'll probably notice we've got Jason Kistler on as well. He's our IT guy, and he's essentially just making sure this meeting actually happens and gets recorded officially. So,
hi everybody.
Hello.
Well,
Hey,
great.
son-in-law.
Go ahead.
Hey, son-in-law.
So I think, like I mentioned earlier, we need 4 for a quorum. So I guess we'll have to table the minutes for the next time. But I think we can still at least run through the business. I don't think there's anything that requires serious decision making at this point, but we can at least kind of talk things through and see where people sit about it. So for the new folks, this is generally the Parks and Rec Commission is a kind of a policy body, I would say, kind of reviewing, I guess, kind of the bigger picture things as opposed to getting your hands dirty, building a playground or doing things like that. Although, we have been, starting to have some conversations about, what the hopes and goals of this commission would be in terms of, do you want to be a hands-on body versus a, kind of a little bit more of a higher level, kind of decision-making body. I know up to this point, we've kind of come down a little more on would like to kind of look at things from more of a policy perspective, reviewing, the parks and where the opportunities are, to better enhance our parks, things that we can do, partnerships that can be formed, ways we can, kind of just continue to improve both the parks and the recreation system here in the community. I guess to that end, since we do have a couple of new folks, are there kind of specific questions you might have about kind of how we go about things or what the purpose of the body is?
I've got all sorts of questions about what issues are before the commission, what the hot issues are. I live off of 7th Street in Independence, right between the Inspiration Gardens and the little park or path, between Maple and Chestnut. So, part of the reason that I wanted to join to be involved, but I looked over the minutes for the last couple of meetings and didn't see anything really pressing. But I guess I'm all ears to hear from you all is what I need to do to get up to speed and be helpful to the board.
Yeah, good idea.
Yeah, just from my perspective, I looked at your minutes from last time and the discussion you had about this, and I like where you're headed as a board that stays probably a little elevated at 5,000 to 10,000 feet and looks down at the grand scheme of what you're doing in parks and parks and recreation. So, and then I also appreciate the monthly meetings. I think there's enough work on your in Independence to, at least for a while, to keep you going on a monthly basis on a policy level.
One question I do have is, what kind of participation does this board have with the City Planning Commission? What kind of input? Is it on by invitation, or do we have a regular presence on the planning commission, or it seems to be our job is part of the city planning. So,
Yeah, so I would say it's frankly pretty separate. The planning commission is largely focused on subdivisions, kind of I think really kind of more as a function of a quasi judicial body where if there's land use decisions that need to be made, that's kind of the place to do it. This board tends to be more, I guess, I don't know if esoteric is the right term, but just kind of more kind of conceptual, kind of just what can be done in the parks. There's not like aside from, so it also acts as the tree board. So if there's decisions to be made about somebody wants to remove a tree and that may or may not be the right decision, regulations on, how high to trim a tree or which types of trees are allowed in the planter strip, things like that, that would be a decision that comes to this board. And then really when, for example, we did a parks and open space master plan update in 2016, and this board was kind of I'd say the focal point of a steering committee for that effort to, we supplemented the Parks and Rec committee with some additional residents to create a steering committee that guided kind of public involvement and kind of that planning process. But when it comes time to actually like formally adopting that plan, it goes to the planning commission first, then it goes to the city council for adoption.
okay. I guess part of the focus of my question is, I'm living off of 7th Street. I'm sure everybody knows there's just a tremendous amount of development, new housing, new streets that are planned to go in. I was curious, what's being planned as far as parks to serve the new housing and the kids and the families in this section of town, and there's development elsewhere as well. So I just want to understand, our input to getting the proper park set-asides from the developers, how to pay for it.
Yeah. So I can, I will send you the Parks and Open Space Master Plan. That's really kind of I'd say the governing document for parks within the community. And it's, as development happens, it both identifies improvements needed to existing parks and kind of opportunities or needs for new parks as development happens, and it sort of identifies and proposes potential places for that. And that's really, I think, kind of the guiding document for the kind of work that you're talking about. And that's typically the document that developers and the planning commission and city council will end up, kind of referring back to when a development is proposed. And they're saying, oh, we don't need a park, or we want to put a park here, or we want to put a park that's this size versus that size. That's typically the document that guides that.
Okay, that'd be helpful.
David?
So Sean, and maybe this is a question because I don't recall from when that was adopted. Was that adopted as part of the comprehensive plan, as an annex to that plan in any way? Because that would I think that would go to John's point about, relating the documents between the planning efforts and the, and the park efforts.
That's a very good question. I honestly don't remember. I know it went to council for adoption, but I don't remember exactly like kind of how it was adopted. So
if you get time between meetings, that'd be great because I think that would be helpful to John, and I know as manager, we ran into that problem early in my tenure that, the parks work, particularly that 7th, 8th, 9th streets areas where there was really not a lot of trailer parks identified through development, and we were sort of lacking the ability to enforce anything on the developers. So it'd be nice to have that as more efficient, more enforceable.
Yeah, definitely. Is that enough of a kind of a basic orientation concept. And John, I'd be happy to sit down with you and just kind of talk through all this stuff as well. I know you emailed me a few weeks ago, and I apologize for not getting back to you sooner on that. But I'd be happy to sit down sometime and just kind of talk through it and go through the plan and do some of that kind of stuff to help you get up to speed on it.
Yeah, that would be helpful, and retired and available most any time. So
Okay, great. Yeah, I
let's
will.
set something up.
Okay, I'll reach out. It'll probably be next week, but I'll reach out to set up a time.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So one of the items that we talked about a little bit at a previous meeting, you probably saw in the minutes, was the Willamette River is part of a designated river trail. So there's the Willamette River Trail, and it runs from the headwaters, I think actually up by Oak Ridge, all the way down to Portland. And the state has been working to enhance that for outdoor recreation. Paddling has become a much more significant recreational option for a lot of folks since the pandemic. Motorboating is also very popular on the river. And so one of the things they're doing is trying to enhance the signage along the river trail. So, what they want to do is they've actually got maps of the entire river identifying where you can camp, where you can stop and get groceries, where there's restrooms, where there's put-ins and takeouts, things like that. And so I'm going to share my screen real quick here because we had, if I can find it, we had talked about, they're interested in putting some signage. Hang on a second. They're interested in putting some signage up in Riverview Park to sort of identify Independence. Because Independence is obviously a pretty important destination for river traffic and both put-ins, takeouts, things like that. And so they want to do more to kind of highlight that this is a kind of a location on the water trail. So I met with one of the state parks guy who's responsible for this. Can you all see the signs here?
Yes.
Great. So and these are sort of examples of what they're putting up and down the river. So this kind of thing would go up in the parking lot. The Willamette River Water Trail sign would go up. So either in the parking lot, over maybe over by the campground, the National Water Trail sign as well, just to sort of try to almost brand the area as, hey, this is part of a larger thing, part of the water trail. And then that vertical one you see down below that says Green Island Landing, that's in real life, it's a larger, just kind of vertical sign that's used to kind of identify where there's opportunities for camping. And of course, we've got our biker boater campground in Riverview Park that's identified as a destination. So they'd like to be able to put that somewhere in Riverview Park. There's one other thing that I want to show you, because they also want to put, this is a river mile sign, and you can kind of see the idea here. It names the location, it names the river mile, identifies it's the Willamette River Greenway water trail, and then it also identifies amenities that you will find at this place. So you've got restrooms, you got a picnic table, something like this in Independence would show a campground. They're also interested in putting this somewhere in Riverview Park facing the river. The others would be sort of facing the parking area where if you're driving in, you see those things. This would be facing the river, and that sign's actually about 4 feet by 2 feet. So it's actually very, very large because you want to be able to see it from the river. So I guess I'm kind of curious if you all have any thoughts on where would be the best place for this. They tend to kind of put them on the shore at sort of the downstream, sort of like the bottom of where the amenity that they're highlighting. But we've got a lot of frontage along the river there in a couple different places where people put in and take out. I'm going to actually pull up a little Google Maps here just to see. So I'm kind of curious on your thoughts about where would be the best place to put some of these things.
Sean, I'm kind of curious about the logic of downstream as opposed to upstream, so that you can see it before you pass it.
Well, that was kind of my thinking too. I didn't think it made a lot of sense. So, they were talking about putting it on the bank, down about here. I don't know if can you see my cursor? Okay.
Again,
So they were talking
Yes.
about trying to put it down about here, which, to me feels kind of fun. I mean, granted, it is right where the campground is, which is located right here, but it still feels, it's kind of like if you miss it. I mean, granted, if you miss it, you got plenty of room to pull off on the gravel bar here. But still, it feels like it would go a little better somewhere up, around here. Now that said, a big 4 foot by 2 foot sign sticking out right in the middle of everything on the bank there might stick out like a sore thumb. So I guess I'm kind of curious on what your thoughts might be on where we should look at putting this.
I think it makes sense maybe to have it upstream a little bit more, kind of where it's steep and rocky and people wouldn't necessarily be accessing the river there anyway, so so it wouldn't kind of get in the way of other uses. And I guess it also kind of depends on what's the plan for any kind of changes that are going to happen in that area. I mean, I think if it's upstream a little bit, that area is already kind of more future planned.
Yeah, you're right. We do have, we're developing designs to essentially redo this whole parking area because, and for those of you who weren't at previous, earlier meetings, you can kind of see this parking lot here is kind of a weird shape, and that's because there used to be a boat ramp right here. And in 1996, the 96 flood dropped a bunch of gravel. It created this gravel bar here, which made it very difficult to launch motorboats. So we ended up getting a grant to relocate the motorized boat ramp. And so this place is still a great spot for paddlers access, but this parking area, it was laid out for boat trailers, for vehicles with trailers. And that's why it's this kind of funny bulbing shape. And so what we want to do is essentially pull back the asphalt and maybe widen it a little bit down here to make it a more natural looking parking area, create a better grassy area here, create a trail connection that actually connects from the trail here to the trail there, where you don't have to walk through like the parking lot and the walkway. And then ideally be able to create some kind of high quality paddlers access right here down at the end of C Street. So that's all kind of in the works. It's all funding dependent. So, I mean, I would say it's kind of a 2 to 5 year horizon type of a project. But we're hoping it'll happen. And if and when it does, there would be a lot of changes around this area if we were to just kind of plant a sign out there.
Where are the takeouts for, obviously the boat ramp? There's another takeout down, next to the campground.
Yeah. So there's kind of two main places. It seems like right here, a lot of people will park kind of right along here and just walk their kayaks down to the river. And it's kind of steep, but it's still manageable. And so a lot of people seem to kind of launch and land right around here. If you go drive down here, you can actually drive down to this gravel bar, and you can see there's actually an old boat ramp right here that some people do also use to launch, typically jet skis and maybe some paddlecraft down here. And of course, anybody who's staying at the campground, if they're boating, is probably going to park their watercraft down here as well.
Okay.
So Jasper, were you thinking somewhere kind of in this area?
I was thinking even farther upstream, kind of north of Riverview or the south of Riverview Park, kind of where the hotel is.
Oh, so like kind of down around here.
Yeah, well, the other thing I was thinking too, and the river, where the river and the land meet changes seasonally too, and you'd probably want it close to the river, and this area is probably going to be closer to the river more often.
That's
And
true.
there's some rocky spots down there that you don't really want people to go down anyway. It might be a kind of way to block off an area.
Yeah, that makes sense. I could see, yeah, because like it does get pretty steep right here, so you could just stick it right on the top of the bank or something like that right over here, so people can see it on the river.
Yeah, I think it'd be very visible from the river, and it probably wouldn't be very visible from the land or get in the way of anybody trying to get down.
Can I assume, I don't want to assume anything, but ask, is most of the traffic, the signage is for going downstream or heading upstream?
I would say
part of both.
going downstream for the most part. It's the river trail signage seems to be a little more paddler oriented than motorboat oriented. So, this would be for paddlers who are floating downstream, and presumably either floating downstream looking for where they're taking out for their day trip, or floating downstream looking for, okay, we're going to stop and get groceries at Independence, or we're going to stop and spend the night at the campground in Independence.
And I agree with Jasper. It needs to be upstream so that they have enough time to react and decide whether they're going to stop or not.
Okay.
I agree with that too.
Great. Yeah. So I think then this would seem to be a pretty logical spot here, and we'll just have to kind of make sure we find a spot that doesn't end up getting overwhelmed by blackberries or some other underbrush, so that it's not actually visible from the river. And then those other signs, I believe he was actually offering 2 or 3 of those river trail signs, so we can kind of, frankly, put one, in a logical spot, like on the power pole here, and we can have one over on the campground as well.
Are there many of these or takeout designed for or thought of for the island the city owns, Sean? A little further south.
The island down here.
Yeah.
By the bridge.
Is there some fairly nice camping or whatever in the summer?
Yeah, and I mean, the short answer is not specifically. Pretty much any island that's below ordinary high water is technically publicly accessible and you could camp on. So, realistically, if you're floating downstream, you could stop and camp, right here if you wanted to. It's allowed. What the river trail is trying to do is, in some ways, concentrate people, sort of offer, here's the best places to camp, rather than go on this, this island that has some undisturbed habitat or something like that. Here's sort of the places that people have found are the best places to camp, and just kind of push people that way.
Got it.
All right, so that's good. The other thing we had to talk about was the parks map. So we've got a bunch of great parks in town, and honestly, some of them I would say are less well known than others. I think the Riverfront Park is very well known, and I'd say very well utilized. But I think a lot of people, unless you live right next to one of the neighborhood parks, a lot of folks aren't necessarily aware of what else is out there. So I wanted to kind of show you a first pass at a parks map, because we've never really had a true parks map, or map, kind of map that we could hand out or have online, that people could see and know what the park system is. And so Fred, our planner, he's pretty handy with GIS, and so he has whipped up a draft parks plan, just so that we can have something that looks a little better than nothing, frankly. So I guess it went out in the agenda packet. I guess I'm kind of curious for your reactions on this. Is it good as is? Should we think about, the color scheme, locations, labeling? I'm kind of open for any thoughts or feedback on this at this point.
I was really pleased to see it. I think I just kind of threw it out as a comment last time, like, oh, wouldn't it be nice to have it? And then all of a sudden it appeared. So I appreciate you guys really putting the effort into making it happen so quickly. But one thing I did wonder about, there were the 2 lots on, I think, Polk Street that the city tried to sell but then couldn't sell. So it seems like they're technically parks. They may not have been developed or anything. And that's part of what I wanted the map for, was kind of so we could think about how to develop different parks. And so I'm wondering if maybe those 2 lots that maybe kind of are parks should be on there, for at least for future thinking.
So that's an interesting question, because You're correct. That park, that land was donated to the city, kind of for public use. It's never been sort of formally thought of as a park, although it is in the Parks and Open Space Master Plan. Are you guys, in we could probably do essentially both, but there is some other public land in the area. So for example, I don't know how well you can see my cursor here, you really can't, but if you follow Gun Club Road to the south, where it crosses Ash Creek, on the northwest side of Ash Creek, there's some vacant land there, and that's actually publicly owned as well. That's owned by the city, and it was, if I we've owned it for a long time, and I think it was honestly a floodplain mitigation thing. There used to be a house there, and I think the city acquired it and got rid of the house because it kept flooding. So it's a very flood prone property, obviously, but it also has potential as park space. So
what is the pathway just to the west of that?
this is sort of the beginning phase of the Ash Creek Trail. So we have a master plan for a trail called the Ash Creek Trail. So this is Ash Creek that goes
Right.
left to right. And so we have a master plan for a trail that would essentially follow the creek. This was the first phase that was done, and it pops out on Gun Club. Part of the reason, or at least, there was an idea that we could potentially continue it and jump it across the creek and land on this public land over here, at the intersection of Gun Club Road and the creek, and then kind of continue on from there. There's been some frankly concerns, from folks about developing a trail, near their houses, and the issues of bridge crossings of the creek with potential flooding. And so this first phase is really the only phase that we've been able to accomplish so far.
Okay, I was just curious. Thank you.
Sure.
Well, I think I was kind of hoping for two things. One is kind of an open space map of kind of what's land that could, potential park or other use. And then eventually to kind of have a publicly accessible document that's, just these are the parks in your community and the amenities that you might want to enjoy there, so that people would kind of have a guide for better utilizing the resources we do have available.
Okay. That makes sense. I'm noticing.
So I don't know if those are two different things or if that's one thing that evolves into another thing. Or
Yeah, because and we'll have to play around with it, because I could see, we've obviously got sort of the labeled parks, and, right over here is actually Henry Hill Park. It's not labeled, but you've got a nice playground next to the former Henry Hill Elementary School, and you've got tennis courts and whatnot here. So we'll definitely need to label that. But we could, as part of this map, include just sort of public open space. Like you said, it's just sort of it's open ground, but it's still public land if people wanted to go and throw a Frisbee or something. Or we can just use that as sort of an internal planning document.
because there's another little like one block park, like I think like on I Street, that I didn't see on the map either. It's got like a little picnic shelter and not much else. But so there's little spots that I.
Oh yeah, that's Henry Hill Park right here.
Okay, so that's connected to like the pool and all that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's kind of a shared area. It's kind of a combination school district and city property.
Okay.
Is the park over on Olympic Drive part of our purview? It looked like it was outside the city limits.
Correct. Yeah, this is City of Monmouth over here.
Okay.
Yeah, the Talmadge Road, this road right here, at least where it's located here, that's the dividing line between Independence and Monmouth. Independence is the vacant land over here. Monmouth is the built up land on the left.
Okay, so we wouldn't necessarily want that park noted on our map.
Correct. Although, it is the kind of thing that's considered, when we were doing the Parks and Open Space Master Plan, we want to try to organize it so that essentially everybody is within a certain proximity of a park. And so, in this case, even though it's another city, it's a nice park. This is Madrona Park over in Monmouth. That's pretty close. So people who are living, right here next to Talmadge would probably be interested in heading over to Madrona.
Okay.
Which kind of means that you could potentially have a park farther in, to this area to serve that area a little better.
It makes sense. Thank you.
Mhm.
And it's not shown here, but also wouldn't kind of the islands and some of the land down to the bridge and south, isn't that kind of also city land that will eventually be park? And
Yeah, that's actually a very good point. Yeah, that would also be all sort of public open space, or kind of however you wanted to frame it. I mean, it's, at most we're going to do just some kind of soft surface trails around there sometime in the future. But yeah, that would definitely be. I know people go down there already in the summertime. There's a little land bridge that gets uncovered when the water gets low enough, kind of right here from the Independence Landing property. I know people kind of go down there and run around and do stuff already.
yeah, it'd be nice to have that reflected on the map if it's possible. But
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that was sort of my reaction to Sean seeing this first. I think it's a great first cut. I'd love to see some of the maybe dashed in some of the future connectivity. It'd be nice to see the the trail connections that dashed in for what is in your open space master plan for this for the whole city, frankly. So people know not only what there is but what there will be, both in terms of park expansion as well as trail extensions.
So
yeah,
I
that's what I
guess,
was thinking as well. So
okay, so I guess I hear what you're saying, and I think it makes sense. Although, I also worry a little bit about creating confusion about. I mean, obviously you can label it, future trail, potential trail, however you want to do it. Do you think it would create confusion to have that, kind of get solid lines and the dash lines as far, because there is plans to run the trail all the way down along the river to connect up with Corvallis Road and then run this way, as we develop a southern arterial. So there's some really, I mean, and we do have an image in the parks plan that I think represents that pretty well. But do you think it would be a little too confusing on a sort of a public facing, here's where your parks are kind of a document?
that's what I was saying. I think we
I
kind of
think
need
it
like a
creates excitement.
planning. Yeah, I think we need kind of a planning document so we know what we potentially could be working with. And I think, if it's publicly accessible, then I think it would be okay. And it's okay to put kind of potential stuff as well as actual.
So two thoughts on that, Sean. One, I think to Jasper's point, probably ought to share up with the committee if you haven't already the Parks Master Plan, so that everybody gets just link us, send us the links to those documents so that we know what already exists on the books. But I think if you change colors, dashed it, and put it in the legend, it might be confusing to some, but I think it also would might act to create some excitement around the where the city's going.
Mhm.
I think that's true because I think the Parks Master Plan kind of also creates excitement. So I think you
Yeah.
piggyback on that.
And if these islands are only usable in certain seasons of the year, you can put that in footnote, to the map, as well, to the legend.
Yeah, kind of seasonally accessible and it'll be a little tricky because you can get to the island down by the bridge here. I think, even when the part over here isn't open, but I think, there's some private property around here that, I think people do cross it, but it's also, I think, kind of one of those situations where technically you shouldn't be, but, people do it anyways.
How much of this is already showing on your interpretive signs that you have on the trail? I can't remember what the width of those trails covers, or those signage covers.
Yeah, the interpretive signs down by the river, they only cover they basically cover, I think they show pretty much the whole kind of riverfront area and then up to about maybe 3rd Street going west. But they only show what's actually there. So the trail along Independence Landing and then the trail running north and all of those things.
Stylistically, it's nice to be consistent if just from that perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but so maybe, I know we're getting a little short on time here, but what I could do is for the next meeting, bring back essentially take the image from the Parks Master Plan, which does have sort of the whole sort of citywide potential trail system map, and see if we can either, I got to take another look at that, see if it also identifies the parks on that same thing. So we could just use that as a planning piece, or if we could just sort of overlay that onto something like this. Because then I think that would be helpful, as we start looking at each individual park, saying, well, how could we better utilize this? How can we better promote it as a way to kind of get people using this park, going here? Because some of them honestly are not, they're pretty lightly used. The Henry Hill Park in particular, I think is, a lot of people go there for the pool, but the tennis courts and the the little picnic shelter area, I don't think are very heavily used. So I think we can kind of use that as a map to look at the next time, to just kind of see if we can identify some connections that make sense for enhancing some of these parks.
One question is, is this the latest city map? Looking down off 7th Street, I live on Maple, just south of Beacon, and this whole area in the south is being developed. I don't see a lot of those streets. I wonder if that's the same situation, north of other parts of the city.
Yeah, I think these lines that you see down here look relatively up to date in terms of where the streets are built and being developed. Obviously, there's no houses here. This picture was probably, it's probably a 2019 picture. We don't do aerial photography. We do, the county gets some aerial photography periodically. And that's generally what we use. So we're kind of, whenever their most recent, aerial photo was uploaded, that's what this would be.
Okay, that's fine.
All right, so just got the 5-minute warning here. So how does that sound? I know we had on the agenda to look at to start kind of going through each individual park and talking about sort of what makes it unique, what makes it distinct, how we can drive people there. Does that sound good as a sort of a topic for next time, to come with a more fully fleshed out map like this that we can use to really visualize what's going on and use that as a basis for conversation?
I think so. The other thing, Sean, maybe obviously there isn't time today, but it'd be nice to have a little bit of brainstorming on a couple of different projects, at least that I've raised with you separately. One is, what you're doing at the bridge in South Main. I think that, to John's point about bringing planning documents together with park documents, that's an ideal location perhaps for a trailhead, but it doesn't independently, may not stand alone. And then the second piece being Mount Fur Park itself and the Inspiration Gardens. There's an opportunity to double that's its size with the neighboring property. So love to have that conversation at the Parks Committee level as well in the future.
Yeah, we can put that one on the list for next time to discuss. I do have one other thing that I wanted to just kind of mention real quickly. I think it's pretty non-controversial, but it involves a park, so I wanted to kind of put it in front of y'all. The museum, as I think you're probably aware, is relocating from the corner of 3rd and B to downtown C and 2nd Street. A couple of years ago, we worked a partnership with the VFW, or maybe it was AMVETS, to put a flagpole in at the museum, and they run a monthly flag ceremony honoring local veterans who have passed away. And with the museum moving out, that place is going into private ownership. We've essentially been, they're interested in continuing that partnership. And we have a very nice flagpole right at Riverview Park at a Veterans Memorial. So, kind of the natural thought was, okay, well, here's an opportunity to kind of, sustain this program. They also have a little display where they have some information about the veteran that they're honoring that month. Typically, Public Works handles the raising and lowering and kind of maintenance of the flags and flagpoles. I believe they're willing to partner up and to continue to work with the Veterans Association at this location. So I just kind of wanted to put that out there to you all and see if you thought that made sense and if you had any concerns or questions about it.
I thought that made sense. And there's, yeah, as you said, there's 2 flagpoles and a Veterans Memorial, like less than a block from the museum, and the museum could still be involved and kind of host a reception or something or provide space. And so I think, you know, the partnership could continue, and it seems like that space could work well.
Great. Any other thoughts on that?
Nope.
Okay, well, I notice we are about 1 minute away, so I will open the floor for a last quick, if anybody's got questions or what's going on with this or anything like that you got a burning desire to ask.
I don't know if there's any ARPA funds available, but we've talked about public art in the parks, and it's a good one-time expenditure that might make some unutilized park more attractive. But
Yep, no, that's a good thought, and the funding has not landed. They're still rolling out the how it can be spent, but it's definitely worth looking at. Any other thoughts? All right.
When I meet with you, I've got a couple of questions about the trees, about budgets and various nitty gritty like
Sure.
that. So we don't have the time tonight, but I'd like to get involved in that.
Yep, sounds good. Happy to talk about that. Well, I appreciate you all coming out tonight and taking the time. And I look forward to continuing the conversation, and hopefully we'll have a couple more folks next time and keep things moving forward.
yeah, thank you so much, Sean.
All right.
Appreciate it.